Next week is going to be a legendary week for My Hero Academia's anime. It is the moment I, personally, and I think many others, have been waiting for a very long time, since we first read it in the manga. Now, don't worry, no spoilers, not gonna really get into it, but I'm just gonna talk about the preview. The preview for next episode is really exciting. I cannot wait to see it. The title of the episode is literally Togata's hero name. It is something that I am truly looking forward to next week. It's going to be, honestly, my Christmas present, because that's what I've been waiting for, and it's just coming around at a perfect time. I'm excited. But speaking of holidays and Christmas, you know what? Happy holidays to all of you. I know that some of you might not watch this video until after Christmas because you might be busy, etc. But I just want to say Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, may you have a wonderful week, wonderful weekend, etc. I really do hope you're having a wonderful day. But anyways, with that all out of the way, though, I do apologize if you hear any rain in the background. There is a large thunderstorm going on, and I've been waiting around for hours now for it to pass, but I looked it up, and apparently it's not going to be going past me until, late tonight, around, 12 o'clock at night, so, obviously I don't want to wait that long to be able to record, so I'm just gotta do it. So if you hear any rain, I apologize. I really do. There's just literally nothing I can do about it. So, anyways, with that out of the way, let's talk about this episode. So, there is a lot of things that we learn from this episode. There's a lot of character development. There is just some things in this episode that I think is going to blow people away. Now, obviously, everybody's going to be talking about probably two critical moments, and that is most likely the League of Villains, for instance, Toga and Twice popping up and doing what they did within this episode, but also the whole situation with Rappa and how Night Eye handled that clone. There is one little detail that I want to talk about that I think will be completely glanced over and not mentioned whatsoever, and I think it's kind of sad that it won't be, because there's so much potential with what was stated within this episode. So let's get right into it. So when we had the whole little dialogue sequence between Fat Gum and, Rappa, he talked about how he was a part of an underground fighting ring, for instance, MMA, I believe that was the name. He basically talks about how he was fighting in this underground, they were able to use their quirks to their full extent, and basically it was death matches. Now when it comes to fighting rings, underground fighting rings, etc., people making money off of it being violent to where it's literally a death battle, this is stuff you see in stories quite often. I've seen anime that kind of depict this, etc. Megalobox is kind of an example of that. And, I love stories like that. And many might say it's not anything new, etc. But when you really see that little bit of world building within this episode, honestly, if Horikoshi really wanted to, he could literally design an entire story off of whatever the underground world is of, let's say, boxing, ring matches, etc. Just imagine it. Just take a moment. Just stop thinking about the heroes and villains, etc. Just take a moment to think about a series set in the My Hero Academia verse that is focused on a character that works up the rankings throughout a death battle / death match in the ring, etc., boxing, whatever, kickboxing, and, utilizing their quirks to be able to move up. Just imagine how interesting that would be. It's a really nice little piece of world building that this episode gave, and it's kind of just imagine the potential here. Obviously, I doubt we're ever going to get a manga or whatever, or a story on that little piece of information we got from this episode, but I still think it's really cool, and it's just good to think about, and it adds life to the story, and it's stuff like this that I really appreciate from, writers and just stories, when, the writer goes out of the way and adds these little details that, honestly, the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter, but it just adds more believable elements to the world, where you're like, whoa, this is crazy, this stuff is going on behind the scenes and all that to these characters. If you know anything about Fat Gum obviously knows about this, because he was also someone that participated, in ring matches, etc. So he would definitely know about this underground fighting ring and all that Rappa was going through, which is why Rappa was even talking about it. It was something that definitely correlated with Fat Gum's past. Rappa as a character, I think, is going to come as a major surprise for everyone that was watching this episode. Because when you see the previous episode, he was battle-hungry, bloodthirsty, fighting Kirishima and Fat Gum, and he obviously did have a sense of pride or honor to him, but I don't think anyone kind of expected his character to go like it was within this episode. He was legitimately going to allow Fat Gum and Kirishima to heal up and get ready for they can continue fighting. He's like, here, let's take him to the med bay, etc. Let's make sure that he doesn't die and all that before we can fight again. It's a really honorable moment between heroes and villains, and you can see it really took Fat Gum by surprise, and he actually started to believe Rappa's words, because Rappa, he was someone that was driven by his passion, what he wanted, for instance, to be like someone that dies in battle, fighting, etc. He wants a true death match. That is what he lives for. He lives on that like dopamine addiction of just straight up thinking he's about to die. He loves those final moments, that adrenaline rush, and it makes him crave for more, and obviously he doesn't want to see individuals that kind of forced into that position to just die right now. He would love to see them stick around for he can fight them once again. So I find it really cool just how that, little character development was done for Rappa in characterization, showing that he is kind of like an interesting villain. He's a different take on a villain, and he's not necessarily someone that you could probably assume might be done, here and done, and this will be the last time we see of him. It's very likely that Rappa will pop up maybe one time in the future, maybe either at the hands of assisting Fat Gum. I could definitely see Fat Gum in some cases probably looking at the prison or jail that, Rappa goes into and tries in some way to give him, a purpose or reform him in a way to where it doesn't have to necessarily be a death match, but he can put his strength and utility for another purpose, maybe for good. I can really see Fat Gum doing that, because Fat Gum is a type of character that does like helping individuals out that have certain issues and all that, and, probably issues that are really deeply ingrained in their very core essence. I could see maybe Fat Gum doing something like that, and since they do have a history of both being a part of ring fights, I could see also Fat Gum making a connection with him. At the very least, Kirishima and Fat Gum are okay, and Rappa is in custody at the very least, which, by the way, there is definitely something we did get from this, is that Rappa is someone that is incredibly fast, incredibly strong, but even though he has all these little details, it still was not enough to be able to bring down Overhaul. That was something we learned from this episode, which kind of puts in perspective how scary Overhaul is, because when you first look at his general appearance, he looks very scrawny, he doesn't look like someone that has a lot of muscle and mass, it doesn't seem like he's anything too scary. At the same time, we have witnessed what his quirk is kind of capable of. We have witnessed that he is able to destroy things, and we learn within this episode a little bit more details that he's able to destroy but also recreate and literally bring people back to life almost. Like legit, he killed Rappa multiple times and he reformed his body back for he could keep doing it over and over to make Rappa submit to him. And you gotta imagine in that moment, Rappa as a character, how he felt about that, because he's a guy that wants to die. He's a guy that basically wants to go into a death match and die. One or the other dies. And when he does die, but he's brought back, it's such a dishonor to him. It's literally crapping on everything that he knows and loves. That's what Overhaul was doing to him, which it makes sense now why he doesn't like Overhaul, is because of just how Overhaul trampled on his very ideal, what he liked. So I find that very fascinating, though, how strong Overhaul is and kind of what his quirk is capable of, which, by the way, that little sequence was also used for another element that I think might have flew over everybody's heads. One of the elements it tried to reveal was that what the full extent of what was going on with Eri was. Now, we all know that Eri is definitely being used to manufacture these bullets, etc., being able to manufacture this ammo to remove quirks. It's very apparent by everything that's been happening in this arc. And the question is exactly what's been going on. We know Eri's bandaged, we know that she's central to the whole scheme of what Overhaul wants, so what is he necessarily doing? Now, there's already been gruesome imagery of, basically Eri being literally dissected, like, just in pieces, and then, he uses her blood, etc. But that imagery we saw a few episodes back is definitely true. He's legitimately ripping Eri apart. He's ripping her arms off, stealing whatever DNA, blood, etc. from her, and then he's putting her back together. Now, I know many are going to be wondering, why does she have bandages on if he is able to reform and recreate, etc.? Well, from what we could clearly see, he's not necessarily able to completely recreate, complete, it seems like he takes the overall matter of whatever something is, and he just puts it back together. So, example, let's say there's a mass of an object, like how everything has a mass, and, you can't necessarily add to it and all that, you could take from it, but if you want to put it back to its original form, you got to keep everything, all the elements there. So when he reforms Eri, he basically takes some of her, essence, like her blood, etc., but then he puts her body back together, and she's fine. And the bandages are basically for her to heal, because she does need to heal after, because he did take from her, and he can't necessarily put back what he takes if he does need it for his operation. Example, blood, skin, whatever. So yeah, it's kind of messed up. We get the full extent of what's going on with Eri, which explains why she's terrified of literally anyone putting her hands near her because of what he has been doing. Let's talk about Rappa at the end when Twice popped up, and we see how Rappa is quickly just dispatched, completely destroyed in a matter of seconds from Night Eye. Now, Night Eye, as a character, as I've already said, I love him. He's a great character. I love his personality. I like what he represents. And, we all know now that he has this burden on his shoulders, this weight, this curse of his quirk. And he's someone that definitely has seen a lot. He's able to kind of see the future in some essence. And because of how much he's used his quirk, he's able to kind of tell what might happen because of just how he's seen it so much. And he doesn't really even necessarily need to use his quirk, because it's kind of like his third eye has opened. And you see how he quickly just destroys Rappa's clone. Now, there's a couple things I do want to point out that we know of when it comes to Twice's cloning. Twice's cloning, it does perfectly copy the clone's strength, or the person's strength. So Rappa did have his full strength and speed, but he was completely destroyed in an instant. What many need to take is that Twice's clones lack durability. They're not as strong as, let's say, the original copy. Example, you see Rappa in this episode, he gets back up after all that beating he got from Fat Gum, and he walks around, even if he's hurt, etc., he did get back up. While the Rappa that was the clone, even though he was pushing the wall, if it was the original, he might have got back up and continued fighting. That's the point here, is that it wasn't necessarily Rappa being weaker than Night Eye, it was the fact that Rappa's clone was just not able to sustain damage to that extent. But it does say a lot about Night Eye, though. He was able to quickly just get rid of Rappa, someone that made Fat Gum and Kirishima struggle. That's kind of insane, honestly. So Night Eye is ridiculously strong, and it's two examples we got of this episode of individuals that could potentially fight Rappa, Overhaul, and Night Eye. It makes you wonder, is Night Eye going to fight Overhaul? So, okay, lastly, let's talk about the League of Villains. They popped up, and also what Shigaraki is doing. So, there is a lot of character development that Shigaraki got. Very, very clear that he has changed from his original appearance in the first season. And to kind of refresh and remind everybody, when Shigaraki first appeared within the story, he was someone that was immature. He yelled a lot, he screamed a lot, he was someone that thought of everything like a game. He just didn't really seem like he was really focused. He didn't have a clear goal. He wasn't able to process and get a plan. He wasn't really able to rely on others. He didn't know how to utilize his pieces, his chess pieces, his friends, etc. He did not really know how to do what a villain should be able to do, for instance, like All for One. So, you can see clearly from this episode, he has made a radical shift. He is no longer the same individual. He legitimately used Twice and Toga in a way that wasn't necessarily malicious, and he did it as an actual smart leader. When he's talking to Toga and Twice, obviously they're upset, which for good reason. He is fully aware of why they're upset. They lost one of their fellow members, Magne. Magne died from Overhaul, and you come up and looks like you're bowing to Overhaul, it's gonna make people not like you. They're gonna be really upset. You can even see Mr. Compress, he was kind of upset. Even if he had a mask on, you could tell that just from his general atmosphere around him that he was upset about whatever Shigaraki was doing. And so Shigaraki clarified, he's like, okay, I'll take off the mask and I'll tell you, I trust you both, and if you want to do what you want to do, do it. Just right now, we need to put on an appearance. We need to put on an appearance to work with him, and then we can do whatever you want. And I think that's a really cool little moment, because it's kind of like Shigaraki didn't tell them to do what they did within this episode, for instance, betray Overhaul and his group, but he kind of implied it. Basically, he's like, I trust you guys enough to know what you will do. So if you can go in there, put on this image, and then stab them in the back, that's completely fine. Do what you want to do. He gave them complete freedom to do what they want to do. So I find that really cool, because it's kind of like showing that this group of villains, they aren't necessarily just evil to each other. Like, even though they're the villains, they're not villains to each other. They trust each other, they work together, they honor each other. Even Toga, which has been shown to be a psycho, literally helped out twice within this episode by putting on a bandage over his head where he didn't feel like he was splitting. That was a very big moment to really show the connection that Toga has with Twice, but also the League of Villains' overall connection too, as basically a family. So it's fascinating. I love this episode for that in-depth look of the League of Villains and what they're scheming right now when it comes to Overhaul, using the heroes to bring down Overhaul. That's obviously what Toga and Twice are doing. Now, lastly, let's talk about the finale, which is obviously Togata arriving. He's going to be arriving at Overhaul very soon. Next week is going to be a blast. It's really going to be something that I'm excited for. I've been really, really looking forward to it since Season 3, honestly, when I was watching Season 3. I've been looking forward to just that arc being animated, or this arc being animated. I'm excited. So, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.